Now, the United States of America has the largest and most technologically powerful economy in the world. But a new report is making the land of the free and the home of the brave seem a little bit more like a third world nightmare. Now, according to an Associated Press report, the U.S. poverty rate has skyrocketed under the Obama administration, with a stunning 1 in 7 Americans considered poor in 2009. This was described as the largest poverty rate uptick since the U.S. started calculating these figures way back in the late 1950s, which makes me wonder whether all those dire economic projections of doom and gloom for the world's #1 economy may just be right. Joining me for more on this is Derek Thompson. He's a staff editor at The Atlantic. Derek, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, these don't seem to be good numbers by any means. I mean, we're at a time where unemployment rate is hovering near 10%. Debt is spiraling. We're not in a good economic situation. So on top of all this, 15% of the population in poverty in 2009, how scared should we be?
Well, we should be scared, and we've had enough reasons to be scared about the economy for a long time. These census numbers, I think, are right in line with what we expect to see. There was another report that came out a few months ago that showed that 1 in 6 Americans are in anti-poverty programs like Medicaid and food stamps and unemployment benefits. And these numbers have skyrocketed over the last 2 years, just like the poverty rate. So the government is well aware that more Americans are entering poverty, and there are sort of automatic measures to help them with that by automatically putting people who fall off of payrolls onto unemployment insurance, so they have some money, some percent of money is replaced so that they can buy toilet paper and provide for their kids.
Right.
The current American family generation, unless they've seen personal hard times, almost scoff at the idea suggested by their grandparents and great-grandparents that it would be wise to have a savings account in the bank, and even more important, to have a food savings account, a reserve stored away for possible hard times. It's difficult for them to believe that there could be a shortage of food. After all, the grocery store shelves are full, and the only challenge is that food prices are skyrocketing. It seems that most Americans assume that the only need for a food reserve would be in the case of some natural disaster like a hurricane, a wildfire, an earthquake, or, of recent concern, a possible epidemic. And unfortunately, most of us think like the average invincible teenager that none of these things will actually happen to us. Very few people realize that one of the main causes of food prices rising so quickly is the food shortage both worldwide and in the United States. Folks tend to assume, as the old saying goes, if the dog ain't biting me, then dogs don't bite. Unfortunately, the dogs of economic, political, and natural disaster are biting every one of us. It's just a matter of degree as to how each of us is forced to adjust to the pain. The extent to which we're dependent is the extent to which we have given power over ourselves to that on which we depend. Every fear that we as human beings can experience is somehow connected to a threat to a dependency. Think about some of those dependencies that are threatened. Millions of Americans are losing their homes, and the numbers are increasing as the depression deepens. Millions of Americans are losing their jobs. There are serious climatic changes and natural disasters occurring with significantly greater frequency that many believe are the result of the planets aligning themselves in their multi-thousand-year cycles. Food prices are inflating to the point where millions of Americans are unable to afford food even though they still have jobs. The threat of epidemic arises from time to time and is addressed in the Second Patriot Act in the requirement that in a state of an emergency, if a family is unable to show capability of sustaining themselves without help for at least 30 days, they will be required to relocate to a gathering center. And the list goes on with each fear that we can have being generated by a dependency that is threatened. I know that I'm going to sound like a one-string banjo at this point, but if you think about it, the answer to all of these concerns is to become fearless by taking control of the one single most important and greatest dependency we have: food. A savings account in food can freeze its cost against inflation. It will guarantee by actual possession the availability in times of shortage. A supply of food is the best insurance against loss of income. And your food savings account can literally turn a disaster into an adventure through preparedness. Yes, a supply of food is the greatest step toward fearlessness and independence a human being can take. It's my personal belief that it's the moral responsibility and the patriotic duty of every one of us who can to provide for our own necessities, so that the government relief and private charitable organizations are free to care for those who are unable to care for themselves. Our lives seem to be somewhat predictable. It's pretty much a good guess that when we are in good times, that some tough times will shortly follow. And when we are in tough times, good times will shortly follow. The magnificent thing about a savings account and food is that it allows us to fearlessly face both the good times and the tough times of the exciting but uncertain future. The mission of eFoods Global is to feed and prosper all those who will hear and accept the call to personal liberty and freedom, and the fearless independence that is in fact the great American dream.